That was let me try that again. There we go. I hit my ring. Well, welcome to Student Night House Parties, guys. It is so good to digitally be with you. Stetson is laughing at my pain.
That's right. I would expect the same from you.
It is true. Like I'm laughing about the fact that you've got to go get a cavity filled today.
I
Oh, wait,
do.
no. A crown.
No, cavity.
Cavity?
Yeah.
Really brush your teeth more, bro.
I know. Really, it's just a filling got old. It's not that it's a cavity. It's just that the filling needs replaced.
He has old teeth.
I have old teeth.
Old man head.
Yep, that's true.
But a beautiful beard. So
Thank you.
it's a win.
Thank you.
Well, hey guys, to kick it off, why don't we go ahead and do some slices? Interesting things happening, culture, the world, things we've learned that have fascinated us. Why don't you go first?
Yeah. So I heard a rumor. Do you like McDonald's breakfast foods?
I like their egg McMuffin sandwich thing.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty good. So I've heard that if you go to McDonald's as they're transitioning from breakfast to their normal menu,
Okay.
you can order something on the secret menu called the McBrunch Burger, and it's a double with egg and hash browns. And I'd never heard of that before. I don't know how true this is, but if you like McDonald's and
They transfer over at like, what, 10:30?
10:30, yeah.
Well, when we finish filming, because today is Tuesday and it's 10:10, we could probably go get one.
I don't know if I'm hungry. And I don't know how good that sounds, honestly, to me.
Do it for the gram.
I don't gram.
Hey, you do. You have an Instagram.
I do, but I don't know. I don't spend any time on there.
But
Sorry
you
if you follow me for boring you.
Actually, they probably don't because you have a private account.
I do. Oh, I didn't know that. See, I haven't even you've spent more time on my Instagram than I have on mine.
Maybe. I don't know.
Stalker. Yeah.
You know the people you work with, right? Keep your friends or keep your enemies close, your friends
time
closer.
in person together. Anyway.
Or is it friends close, enemies closer?
Keep your friends close and enemies closer.
Cool.
But you're my friend.
Keeping you
So
close.
yeah, but not too close.
All right, so for my slice, I got a website I go to. It's called crack.com. Not
What?
crack. Cracked. C-R-A-C-E-D. Yeah.
Is this on the dark web?
No. CRACED.com. It's a comedy website. And every once in a while they post these like articles just about random interesting facts. And so I was reading one this morning, and the reason I picked this one is because of a slice you brought about a month ago about the couples and, the YouTube thing with the music and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So y'all know what a sloth is?
I do.
Sloth is an incredibly slow animal. They're, just known for being super duper lazy. Well, there are some researchers who have been studying the bowel movements of a sloth.
Of course they have.
So, I know, right? Like our tax dollars are good work
Yeah.
funding sloth poop studies.
Yeah.
So, your typical animal, they have a bowel movement once a day, twice a day, something like that. Guess how often a sloth goes to the bathroom?
Once a month.
Once a week.
Oh.
Once a week, yeah. So sloths, like in the jungles, they live up in the trees. And so most animals, like monkeys or other things that are up there, they'll just kind of go from the tree branch, just let it fall below.
Yeah.
Which if you're an animal below and you get hit by that, you're like, oh, come on, man, what are you doing, monkey? But a sloth, like there is something within them that will not allow them to do it. And so they've got to slowly climb down the tree and get to the forest floor. And these things are super slow.
Yeah.
But then they do a dance to get ready to go to the bathroom. Like,
No
you could
way.
actually YouTube some of the videos. It's like this little weird shimmy thing where they like put their arms up on the tree and they start shaking their butt to go to the bathroom. And here's the part that got me. Like, something like 15% of sloths, when they're actually going to the bathroom, because it takes them so long, they get killed and eaten by another animal when they're out in the wild.
15% of the
Yeah,
time?
yeah. I mean,
Yikes.
can you imagine? And so this is just the ones that live out in the jungle, but like they're doing their little shimmy dance, like a cheetah comes and gets them.
It's like they see it coming, like, no, 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 no. Once again, we're 12. Somehow
Maybe-
we always get back to poop.
Maybe I'll find a way to post a video and like the link in the description here on YouTube so that you guys can watch the little shimmy dance. Dude, it's funny. Like, there's a woman who had a pet sloth, and whenever it would go do its shimmy dance, she would go out and dance with it.
Oh, that's supportive.
Some people need supportive poopers.
That's true. Yeah, like that video that, yeah, okay. Yeah. Anyway.
Anyways, hey Stetson, do we have any announcements that we want to let everybody know about?
I don't know. I mean, we have a student night the first Wednesday in May.
We do, and then we've got summer calendar coming out soon.
Yeah.
Which should be out to you guys in about 2 weeks. We'll actually have it to you in person the night of our next student night, but we are planning paintball. We are going to do lots of barbecues, house parties. We are doing
Are we going to a Rockies game?
We're going to a Rockies
game.
And then also a 4-night mission trip. Well, 3-night, 4-day type thing here in our city. We're going to have a fun day. Potentially going to Elitch's, which may or may not be closed.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll do something cool.
We'll have something planned before we actually try to go there. But it's going to be awesome. We'll have more details for you guys. It should be grand.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
It'll be really fun.
Cool. Well, we kicked off a brand new series last week called Jesus Is. And what we're doing is we're taking a couple weeks to really try to correct some of the false thinking that people have about Jesus and honestly even some of the false teaching that we have about ourselves. Like the reality is there are a lot of people who believe things about Jesus and about God and about Christianity that causes them to walk away from him, that cause them to reject him, that quite frankly just aren't true.
Absolutely.
And so we figured we would use our time together and our time in our groups to really be able to process this. And we know that last week you guys had some great conversation in your house parties.
It was awesome.
Yeah, mine did, and I know that the other ones did as well. So that's really our hope is like everything we talk about, it's the beginning of a conversation that we want to continue with you guys as you gather in your groups to just really wrestle with what God is saying to you and what he's leading you to do. So last week we talked about how Jesus is our friend, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Today we got another one. So to kick it off, Stetson, have you ever seen the show 24?
I love 24.
Jack Bauer for president next year or 3 years or whatever it is. I don't know.
I'd vote for him.
I would too. If you guys haven't watched it, you guys should check it out. I think it's on Amazon. But like the whole premise of this show is Jack Bauer. He is the leader of a thing called CTU. It's like the counter-terrorist unit. Mm-hmm. And his job is to basically stop these crazy, ridiculous terrorist plots that happen. And it takes place in 24 hours, and it's nuts. But the thing I love about Jack Bauer the most, beyond him just being like totally amazing at what he does, is this sense of justice that he has. Like Jack Bauer will stop at nothing to make sure that the bad guys get punished.
Right. Even if his like commanding officer tells him not to do something, he'll be like, "No, I'm doing it."
I know, and it's like, you're breaking a law to do it. I don't care.
Yeah.
What he did was wrong.
Yeah.
Like this profound sense of right and wrong and justice drove everything that he did. And I was thinking about that. I think to a degree, like a lot of us feel that in our lives as well. Like maybe not to the same degree to like a Jack Bauer would, but like our culture and our society and even our lives in general, we are driven by this idea of justice, of right and wrong. And so when somebody does something that hurts you, what do you want to do? You want to get justice.
Yep.
You want to get revenge. And now sometimes we take it a little bit too far. It's like, oh, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you worse. Like that's not what we're talking about here. But you think about like our court system, like all the laws that we have, like you speed, you get a ticket, you steal something, you go to jail, right? Like our entire society is designed to be about justice. And the thing is like we love it when somebody else is on the receiving end of justice. We don't like it a whole lot when we are.
Not super fun.
No, like we can be a little bit selective about this, right? Like, yeah, I want justice for Stetson when he steals my candy.
Right.
Which he doesn't do, but hypothetically. No. But if I steal his, it's like, hey, bro, like you left it out. Tough beans.
It's true.
I promise we're going somewhere with this. This idea of justice. We are going somewhere with this.
In the back of my mind, I'm like, Ethan has candy? Where?
We'll get the big bag of it.
Oh, that's ours. It's not yours.
But I made it appear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, okay, so justice. We're talking about justice. So for me, like when I was a new Christian, when I in college really gave my life to Jesus, that whole idea of right and wrong, it became this thing that drove me in my faith. Like, I wanted to be the best possible follower of Jesus. Like, I wanted to do everything absolutely right. Like, I wanted to go to church enough. I wanted to pray enough. I wanted to serve enough. I wanted to give enough. I wanted to read my Bible enough. And it was this thing that was in front of me. But the problem is, like, I never felt like I could do enough. Like, it was this thing that I was constantly chasing after, and I was always failing. Like, I knew that God kind of had this standard for my life of what he expected for me, but then I would look at my own sin and my own brokenness, and like I would feel like I was just missing the mark. And so it kind of got to like this obsessive thing where I then began to put more rules in my life and more regulations and more things that I needed to do. It was like, oh, reading my Bible for an hour a day is not enough. Like, I should read it for an hour and a half. Praying for a half hour is not enough. I should pray for an hour. Giving 10% is not enough. I should give 20%. And it got to this point where following Jesus, it wasn't a joy. Because I'd built up this whole thing of like justice and of rightness, and like it was like this totally unattainable thing, and I was just exhausting myself chasing after it. And I got to a point where I just felt terrible about myself because I knew I could never be enough. I could never be good enough to satisfy this like thing that God wanted for me.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
Yeah. I think I've experienced kind of the same center, but just from a different angle. Like, for me, I grew up, I don't know, like, looking back in hindsight, I was incredibly lucky. Like, I was just set up with like a really, really good household and family, and I knew Jesus from a really young age, and I knew all the right things to do. And like, I was a pretty good kid. Like, I didn't really have a rebellious stage. I didn't do anything wrong, but it kind of set up this thing where it was like, okay, I'm not, like, I was totally falling short in a whole bunch of areas. I just didn't know it, but it was like, comparatively, it's like, I'm pretty good. But in the back of my mind, it was kind of the same thing, but from a different angle of just like, oh man, like, this goodness is so fragile. If I make one mistake in my life, all the good that I've done just crumbles. And then Jack Bauer Jesus is going to come like kicking down the door like, justice. It's like, you failed. And so it's kind of like the same fear, just from like a different realization.
Yeah. And I imagine that there are probably some of you guys who have experienced that as well, right? You know, there's this thing that you want to live up to, this thing that you are chasing after, and like, there's fear because you feel like you're not enough. There's exhaustion because you feel like you're doing too much. And the question that I'm left asking with your story, with mine, and probably some of your guys's as well, is that what Christianity is actually about?
That's a good question.
Right? Is it really just about trying to be good enough to earn God's love? Is it really about trying to do all of the right things so that we can check off all the boxes? You know, I think a lot of us, we've grown up, whether people have intended to teach that to us or not, but like, we've grown up thinking that, and I think that's why we end up being so hard on ourselves sometimes. And I think that's why we also end up being so hard on other people as well.
Absolutely.
Because it's easier to attack other people as opposed to dealing with our own shortcomings and that kind of stuff. And the question is like, man, is this the Christian life? Like, is this the thing that God has actually invited us into? And I don't think it is.
I don't either.
And all of this has to do with our relationship with Jesus and the way we interact with him, and also the way we see him. Like, is he this Jack Bauer, kick in the door, beat the crap out of you God? Or is he something else?
Right.
Yeah. So as we've been doing, what we want to do is we want to go to the Bible. We've been looking at stories each time we gather together to really see in Jesus' own words, how does he think about us? How does he see himself? Because it is way better to take his word than our word. So, Setson, why don't you read for us Luke 15:11-32?
Great. This is a story that Jesus told. And Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me, when, like, his father died. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So basically, he was so hungry, he was like eating the pigs' food. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to his father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you, and never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'"
Yeah, so this is a story, a parable that's called the parable of the prodigal son in the church, right? You've got this younger son who is like the rebellious one, wastes a bunch of money. You've got this older son who's the goody two-shoes, followed every rule, and then you've got this father. Jesus had a purpose in telling this story, but I don't think it's the one that we commonly associate with it. You see, a lot of us, when we read this parable, we try to place ourselves in the position of one of the kids, right? So if you're the kid who struggles and you've got a lot of sin and brokenness and just heartache, you're like, okay, I'm the younger son. Like, I'm going to go back to the father. If you are you in the story, you're like, I'm the older son. I did everything right. But truth be told, this parable isn't about the sons.
Right.
It's about the father and the way he loved and the way he cared for his sons. You know, I get so struck by that thing his son said when he came back, where he goes like, "I am no longer worthy to be called your son," which is such a funny thing, because when was he ever worthy to be called a son?
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I think about my kids. I don't love my kids because of how good they are.
Right.
I don't take care of my kids because of what they do for me and how they treat me. Like, my love for them literally has nothing to do with what they can do. They're my children.
Absolutely.
And I love them. And I will do anything for them. Like, I don't care how well they perform or how terribly they perform. Like, they are mine.
Yeah. Yeah, they're useless. Like, they do nothing for us. Like, eventually they'll start doing chores, but as of right now, it's like they don't contribute anything, but it's like we would do anything for them.
Well, and I think that's such like a helpful kind of picture to have in our minds when we think about God and the relationship that he has with us, right? Because so many of us, we tend to think about God as being that angry God in the sky who just wants to throw lightning bolts if we don't get it right. But like, he's actually the father in this story. The father who goes, "You were gone, you're home, like, let's celebrate. Son, you stayed, that's great, but like, don't miss the party." Like, God is constantly inviting us to this party, and it has nothing to do with how good we've been. It has nothing to do with how bad we've been, because it's not our party, it's his.
Right. Absolutely. And just like there's a whole bunch of cultural stuff packed in there, but when the son asked for his father's inheritance, he was basically saying that he wished that his dad was dead.
Yep.
And he just wanted his money so he could go. And coming back from that, like maybe you've even told your parents that before. It's like, I wish you were dead, and you probably didn't mean it, but after you cooled down, like coming back to them, you probably felt like pretty ashamed, but this was that, but to like a whole other level. Yep. But when the son started walking towards his home, the father ran out to meet him.
Which would have been like a totally shameful thing for him to do in that culture.
Absolutely.
Like a father does not run to a son.
Mm-hmm.
The son comes and falls before the father and begs for forgiveness. Like that's what the son did, because that's what the son expected.
Right.
And he didn't even expect that his father would take him back.
Yep.
And yet the father goes and embraces him.
Yeah.
And kisses him and takes the best stuff he has in the house and gives it to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is what God does for us. And so if we kind of place ourselves in the shoes of these two sons, like, man, if you are at a place in your life where you have just totally gone off the tracks and you're doing things you know you shouldn't do, things you don't want to do, like God doesn't hate you. Like he's not sitting there saying you've got to do X, Y, and Z in order to earn my love. And conversely, if you're like the older son and you've been doing everything right, like you're like, I go to house party every week, I read my Bible, I pray, like I serve in, the kids ministry at the church, like God doesn't love you anymore either.
Right.
Like
that's not why he loves you.
His love for us literally has nothing to do with our performance or our sin. It has everything to do with what Jesus did at the cross, that thing that we couldn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, the Bible talks about how, like it says, the most extreme act of love that you can show another person is if you're to die for them, like if you took a bullet for them. And that's exactly what Jesus did, is he died for us. So like if there was any need for evidence of how much God loves us, Jesus showed us the most extreme example of love that you possibly can.
Yeah, and that the Bible actually has a word for that. It's called grace.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Jesus and the whole story of that makes sense, but to give you guys just another one, it's a really poignant story that has always stuck with me. There was a woman whose son got murdered, and this is a true story, and the guy who killed him was another young guy, like 19 years old, and he was put in prison. And while he was in prison, this woman went to go meet with the young guy who had murdered her own son. And she would spend time with him, and at first he wanted nothing to do with her, but she would keep showing up, and eventually he would sit with her and not talk. And as more time went on, he would start to talk, and she just kept loving him. She was a follower of Jesus, and she's like, I want to show you grace. And it got to the point where this guy was like, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, you took my son away from me, so now you need to become my son and fill his place. And this woman's grace and speaking life and seeing the humanity in this person that had hurt her so bad, it caused him to meet Jesus. And when he moved out of prison, he moved in with her.
That's insane.
And he became this surrogate son to her. His life, which is a life that should have ended up with him back in prison again. If you look at any of the statistics, it was radically altered because this woman chose not to give him what he deserved, which would be anger, justice, but instead to offer grace.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
That's incredible. And grace, it can tend to be kind of this churchy word that we throw around and not really know what it means, but grace is basically anytime someone does something for you that you don't deserve, like you haven't done anything to pay for it, that's grace. So that lady adopting her son's murderer, that's grace.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you give something to a homeless person, that's grace. Anytime you sit at a table with someone who's sitting by themselves at lunch, that's grace. God forgiving us for everything we've done against him without us paying for it, that's grace.
Well, and this is where it ties back into that justice conversation. Justice says you get what you deserve.
Right.
Us getting what we deserve, according to the Bible, is to forever be separated from God because of our sin. He is a perfect, holy other God. Like, he cannot have sin with him. And yet what God did through Jesus at the cross, it made a way for us to have our sins taken care of so that we could get what we didn't deserve, which is a relationship with him, not only now, but like for eternity. Like, that is grace.
Yeah.
God has chosen to withhold his justice on us and instead place it on Jesus. Like, man,
Yeah.
that's freaking huge.
Yeah.
And so I want you guys to think about that. Whenever you get to this place where you start to create this checklist or to-do list or these expectations that God has for you, think about that story of the prodigal son. That father, he didn't have expectations for his sons.
Right.
He had dreams and he had hopes and he had desires, but none of those things made his love for them contingent upon their performance.
Yeah. Kind of in that same vein, he didn't force it on them either. He, for the prodigal son, he had to wait until the son was basically eating with the pigs and realized this isn't good, and turned around. As soon as he turned around, that's when the father was like, yes, he's back.
Yep. So that brings us up to our big idea. All right, last week we said Jesus is our friend. What's tonight's?
Jesus is grace.
And again, it sounds a little corny, guys, but man, we want this to get locked in your head that the first thing you think of when you think of Jesus is like, man, he gives me grace, not judgment. Because if you can begin to see yourself the way that Jesus does, it's not only going to change the way that you feel, it's going to change the way that you live. Suddenly, you're not going to do all these things like reading your Bible or praying, going to church, serving, or any of that. Like, you're not going to do it because you have to.
Right.
You're going to do it because you get to.
Yep.
Like, you're not doing something to try to earn the Father's love.
Right.
You're just doing stuff because you already know you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I think that's enough for you guys to be able to break off into house parties. So leaders, you guys have questions. We'd love for you guys to be able to engage it and spend some time praying for one another. See you guys next week.